How much delay does that have? Oh, there it is. It just popped in.
Is I don't, Paul.
Oh, good. I wasn't sure I could hear. I didn't hear any sound. Good. I'm on.
Okay, we were all just muted.
Oh, okay.
We're being good and using the push to talk.
Oh. Should I'll mute myself.
Yeah, I just checked the YouTube on my phone. It looked like there's about a 20-second delay between when Paul spoke and my computer screen and when I heard it on the phone.
Yeah, typical.
I've had some trouble with YouTube on Chrome, and I found that in Firefox I didn't have any problem. I don't know quite what was going on, but I had trouble hearing the sound.
Yeah, some programs.
Not for this show, but for trying listening to music and things like that.
Yeah, Linux audio and various programs have problems.
Yeah. I've got a friend. He unfortunately has Windows 11, and he's really not very computer literate. And lately, he has not been able to hear Jitsi.
I want to say hello to Andy. Hello.
Hi there.
I usually do YouTube on my TV or in my car.
Have you already talked about the drone that got clobbered?
We haven't spoken at all about that. I wonder what kind of damage it did to the jet.
According to the Russians, it didn't do any damage.
Not enough.
I thought those drones would have some type of onboard cameras, lateral or forward. They must have video. The Pentagon must have video.
I think they have video and they know exactly what happened and they're just not sharing it.
Well, they've been fairly specific that it dumped fuel on it before nudging it.
What do you think they were trying to do?
V1.
I thought they were pissing on the plane,
Yeah. But after that, they tried doing a World War II V1 buzz bomb wingtip on it and got the propeller instead of the wing, which would take a bit of a bite out of the Sukhoi, I think.
had that. I've had that happen in Vietnam where I got buzzed by fighter jets.
On a helicopter?
Yes,
Mm.
in a helicopter, and the fighter jets were Air Force.
Hmm.
They
It
were
was good
supposedly
purpose.
friendly.
They were going too fast and you were going too slow, Jerry.
That is true.
Well, that at that time it was still a unhappy divorce.
Could you elaborate on that?
The Air Force had been a specialty corps of the U.S. Army,
Oh.
Air Corps,
Mm-hmm.
before they became their own branch of service.
That was in 49.
Yeah, and that's would be within bureaucratic bilious memory,
Hmm.
if not in any service member's personal memory in Vietnam era.
But also at that time, there was a big fight between the Air Force and the Army over over some of the Army transport planes.
Yeah, the Air Force wanted anything with a jet engine, which is why they still fly the ugly aardvark. I mean Warthog.
It
Oh,
was the
and-
Caravan.
A-10s?
but once the helicopters got jet engines, I mean, you've got people maintaining jet engines in the Army. Let the Warthog go to people that want to support it.
That A-10 came in handy in the Middle East because it was they call it a tank buster. It had big cannon taking out the tanks.
I think
In
it
my situation,
got an air-to-air kill. Coming
in
back,
my situation, we're in the mountains
Hmm?
opposite
Jerry?
Phuket Air Force Base, and the jets sometimes would take off directly in our direction.
Ooh.
Could you hear me?
Yes,
yes.
I could.
Okay, Ed is saying he can't hear me. No, I bet Ed is using Vivaldi.
That's impressive.
Hey, Brian.
Hey, how you guys doing? Can you hear me, John?
Yep.
Thank you very much.
I think it was Iraq 1 when a Warthog got an air-to-air kill. It was coming back from a mission with one laser-guided bomb still on a hard point when it saw probably a Hind, but some Russian-built helicopter on an intersecting course. So it dropped a laser dot onto the Hind near the rotor and dropped the laser-guided bomb and just guided it in with a little laser joystick.
Sorry if I missed it, but did you already talk about the drone and the propeller and the MiG or whatever it was?
Yes, we're just
Boy, but yeah,
Not exactly a real whodunit, huh?
Well, I wonder if the Russians are going to try to retrieve it off the bottom of it's 5 miles down, I guess.
They've said they're going to. I would be surprised if the Black Sea was quite that deep, but it's deep enough that it'll cause problems.
Isn't it U.S. property? Can't they can't salvage our property? We should be trying to retrieve it.
Well, we've said we are. Whether we can or not is a different question.
It was reported earlier. It was reported earlier today that as it was going in, they managed to get into it and erase all the programming and data, just to make sure the Russians wouldn't be able to get that.
We
Oh,
we set a certain precedent with Glomar Explorer about how seriously we take that property thing. So I don't expect they'll give that any more scruple than we do.
Maybe they'll find some Russian submarines that sunk down there. A few Russian submarines have gone down. They never retrieved. So
hmm.
I remember that happening when some replicators from another galaxy were. Well, one of them survived when Asgard ship crashed. It's back in season 4 of Stargate.
Brian, are you about ready to start?
I see 9 images on the screen, but not my own. Where's it? Where am I hiding?
In settings, you can turn off or on view self. That's in the kebab menu.
The kebab menu. Sorry.
You're visible.
You can see me, but I can't see me. So the settings is it in the settings view self? Oh, there we go. Bill, where's the view self? Which setting?
Oh, let's see. In settings, it's under the gear more. Self view checkbox hide self view. If you uncheck that, you should see yourself.
Oh, that's interesting. Sorry. So last time I don't think that I unchecked it or rechecked it previously, but thank you. I got it. Appreciate that.
We're seeing 10 images on screen because Bill's sharing his screen in addition to himself.
Yeah, those Fig Newtons look pretty good.
And you understand why I have both Fig Newtons and Shaco Leibniz's along with Pi for Pi Day yesterday, right?
Okay, sure.
Basically, a day old Fig Newton, so they're stale by now.
Oh, I think Fig Newtons are born stale. But they're healthy compared to other cookie type things.
It's kind of scary. Are you guys from the Jitsi experts in the world? So the background blur on mine, is that just because this is on a Intel Core 5 8th generation machine as opposed to something with more of a graphics engine in it? The ghost.
It could be, or it could be the your lighting situation.
Does it make a difference whether it's LED lighting or some other kind of lighting? That's better.
That's better.
That's better. Thank you. Thank you for that. It was a lot cheaper than buying a new laptop too, so I appreciate that. The problem is it's one of these motion activated things, so if it goes off, I'm in trouble. But
You're running Linux, right?
yeah. I actually did. This is a machine that one of the problems with some of these boxes is the cameras and the audio and stuff like that doesn't work. And do people consider Macintosh machines as being some variant of Unix at this point? Or not
Sure.
Linux, but yeah.
I'm using
Oh,
a
it is.
Mac.
It's running a Unix kernel, the variant of the BSD kernel, isn't it?
Pretty
Is
much.
it-
And Federico uses Macintosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have a couple of in the spirit of the Pi Day, those little Pi box, things that are really good little useful boxes, and they're pretty affordable. But of course, they don't come with camera or microphone. There may be a microphone buried in there somewhere, but so I jump back and forth, and usually I have a bigger desktop Linux box, but it doesn't have the camera and the audio plugged into it. So this laptop, so I probably haven't turned the laptop on in a little bit before today, and I think it possibly had an Ubuntu update of how big would the update have been? Maybe a gigabyte. Does that make sense? It was the biggest update I've ever seen on Ubuntu. So they've been busy, obviously. I don't know if we talked about Bill was courteous and said he'd do sort of a Minority Report thing at the end, which I think is when Bill skewers everything I have to say, and I'm okay with that. Kurt may or may not tune in, and Shankar may or may not be in the country, I suppose. But
Are we ever going to get back in MIT in person?
No, they've decided that open campus is ended, much to the disgust of Cambridge City Council. But the hourly paid workers union really like the buildings being locked, since hourly workers don't get doors that lock.
I know we ran out of parking spaces.
I thought
Well,
I
that was
actually
a temporary issue while they were shuffling the buildings around.
thought Jerry's announcement said hybrid, but maybe did I misread that? I didn't dig into it, but which I presume might be in person as well as remote. But
Hybrid could be in person if we find a new in-person space.
gotcha.
But it's unless MIT has a change of heart and decides they want their hourly workers to go on strike, it won't be there.
Is it politically incorrect to ask people if they're mask wearers in public settings? Is that? I'll back off on that. Let's just talk about Fauci. No, okay, I'll back off on that.
No, I wear it in the store with
Yeah.
people, or
Yeah.
not in my car.
Right. I'll sometimes wear one in my car because it's easier going from one errand to the next to just leave it on if it's fitting well.
Yeah, I wear one in stores too.
Yeah, good.
Darn straight.
Good.
That's
Yeah,
why we're still breathing.
I
And
do
what,
too.
what do you have against Fauci?
No, I actually like Fauci a lot. I actually I know somebody who read his his medical texts and in school. I mean there may be somebody lurking here who I think he's a national hero, to be honest with you. But to do what he did, but he was in the news recently and on the lab leak. Have you heard about?
Absolutely.
And so it was interesting because he was just a few days ago. He basically said he didn't rule anything out, and so it was just based on what the evidence shows.
And a bunch of media organizations that live on clicks are taking not ruling anything out, and intelligence agencies having a low level of confidence in a statement as if these were earth-shaking disclosures. And I'm sorry, we have a low level of confidence in a lot of things.
Yeah.
They didn't ask what level of confidence do you have that it splashed over in nature and then cropped up in the wet market. That's probably somewhat higher than low.
Yeah.
Oh, but they didn't ask that question, so they didn't tell them.
Yeah. I actually know somebody who knew his college roommate. Not that it matters, but he he had a tough job to do, obviously, and
He had a very tough job.
yeah.
What a way to end a career, though. A long career.
Yeah.
But
I remember visiting Hong Kong like it was like 30 years ago, I think, and the air pollution was so bad that I remember it was just kind of strange at the time because it was so long ago, and the toll booth operators, they all had masks on at the time just because of the air pollution, so they were a little bit more prepared than we were for the masking.
Well, I was in Hong Kong back in 68, in the summer of 68, and there was very little air pollution there. And of course, Hong Kong was still a British colony at the time. And it was a pretty cool city.
Yeah, I don't know if it was. I mean, they were distinctly. I remember the toll booth operators, so they were lots of cars, and so maybe they were on to the exhaust stuff as opposed to what you see or what you hear about in China in terms of the air pollution from whatever coal.
I think I think the Chinese in general, you always saw a higher percentage of them wearing masks than in Western countries.
Could be a disguise.
My son had summer jobs, or one or two summer jobs in carpentry, and people were working on houses, and they wore Bealcore masks, which were, I don't know, N95. I forgot. I'm not sure about the number, but they sealed well because of the sawdust being blowing around. So it was basically keep sawdust out of their lungs.
Yeah. The difference in that environment is you can wear the ones with valves that exhaust straight to atmosphere, which are, if you see somebody wearing a valved N95 in a grocery store, they're antisocial bastards that aren't protecting you at all because their cough is going straight through the valve into the air.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, my friend is quite a bit on the right-hand side of things. He's actually a skeptic on everything, but he calls Fauci a god Fauci or something like that. He does not like Fauci at all.
The guy had a tough life. I mean, he a tough job there where, I mean, he's getting like death threats and it was bad.
And Trump was president. Remember that?
Yep.
No,
That didn't help.
Yeah. Yeah. He what a vigorous guy though he is. I don't know exactly what age, if is he 80 or upper 70s, or but
Upper 80s.
wouldn't he go out for, like, jogs or runs? Or actually, another thing he was in the news for, wasn't he at some kind of a conference very recently and he basically had to do CPR on someone? Did anybody hear that, or was it just me? I heard it from a doctor, I think, actually.
I didn't hear that he had to do CPR, but I know he was recently at a conference.
Yeah, I think this. Well, this is our collective task, which is before the meeting gets over, can we find a headline that he saved someone? I think from a bad dessert or something. But
Yeah.
well, I can get going anytime. If Bill gives me the code on how to get my screen up again. Sorry about that. Share. If I share,
If you share, it should work.
you'd
It
think
just
on the
doesn't
settings
work.
screen that
If you cancel out of it once, you need to reload the browser and start over.
okay. Where's the share screen? Is it in?
That's the TV with an arrow in it.
Of course, that makes sense.
I just saw Fauci go by in the chat.
Is he in? He's like in the BLU chat.
No, yeah, I believe he is. I saw it flash by. I'm still zooming, so I got to figure out.
Oh, okay. In terms of somebody providing us with an update.
Oh, there it is.
Well, I always save the chat at the end of the meeting, so it'll be on the website afterwards.
It says Dr. Fauci, helps two women after fall on gridiron dinner, Washington, D.C.
That's what it would have been. Two. I didn't realize there were two women.
That's from Ed.
Well, after fall, that would be winter.
After, I think they had a fall.
Yeah.
Who fell? Okay, how's that? Two women who fell. I got cataract, so I'm working on getting those fixed.
So, John, what would your interpretation be if it said after spring? I mean, does that mean that they sort of jumped off the table as well? Tough, good stuff if you get those skills where you can help people.
Jabber, why do you have? Oh, there you go. I thought you had your mic off. You keep it off.
Yeah, after spring would be after they serve the spring rolls as the appetizer.
Right. It was. I see. After. Yeah. Okay. Well, imagine if after spring rolls. I mean, they rolled after the spring. That could be really hurtful.
Or they get cooked on a gridiron.
There we go.
I guess we should be ready to start the topic.
Let's give it a try. Then. Okay, I'm about to share it. Let's see if we can share it, and let's see if we can view it. And
Excellent.
You can see it okay?
Yep.
Okay, and you can hear it okay. If there's anything that looks weird, let me know. So when we talked about this originally, and I'm looking for a little bit of guidance here, and I'll follow up as necessary, but when we talked about doing this topic, it was, cryptography is just generally of interest to me. Encryption, the ability to protect and, secure and save and transit. And so I tripped on the Google work that they were doing in and around this, this Tink library. And so tinkering is really the kind of thing where anybody could dig in, dip their toe in. And I fully expect Bill at the end in his minority report will caution anyone to really only the professionals at some level should be doing this stuff. And so that, I would posit that argues is contrary to tinkering with cryptography, but we'll leave that to Bill in the end to talk about. So, but when we set this meeting up, John may remember in particular that it was, 3 months ago or so, I think. So the only game in town for something that was both cross-platform and positioned as being accessible for encryption type things was this Google Tink library. It was really very appealing. And then a new development occurred really around the early in the new year for me. And sorry, news alert. Silicon Valley Bank, you all know about this stuff, right? What goes up must come down, not necessarily, but we can come back to that. Sorry, that was a news intervention. And this is another thing that maybe Bill will skewer me on publicly and viciously, but to what extent are the Rubik's Cube, cryptography, and group theory related?
Frequently, yes.
Frequently, they are related. Or frequently you skewer me.
Well, both.
All right. Okay. Well, that's what I thought. So what this is going to be is kind of a brief cursory introduction to what they're doing in the Tink library, and then to encourage other people to dig in. And if there's any interest, we could craft up some sample software that comes after this that could be distributed, right? But so they pitch it this way, that it's easy to use. They obviously have a bunch of experts in the field at places like Google. And so to their credit, what they have done is they have essentially come up with probably all their refactored code, and they've figured out that they don't want to be spewing the cryptographic elements in every time they come out with a new product or a new release. So they probably consolidated it, I suspect, for themselves, and they went to work on it, and they put it together into a open source library. These are the example categories: encrypting data, large files, data streams on the left. Key management is something, and I started to touch on this with using some of the Google Cloud stuff, and didn't get far enough along to have anything to demonstrate. But anyways, all of these things they go in depth on and give examples of. This is, I apologize, hard to see, but I'll post links to it. But what you can sort of make out roughly on the left is some Python code, and roughly on the right is some Go code. And the Tink library is supported, available on for a number of different languages. The two that I've done a little bit of tinkering with are both Python and Go. This was something that I really just learned about in kind of putting together some slides for tonight, which is kind of interesting. So as part of their roadmap, they're splitting Tink into multiple GitHub repositories, which to me is, I guess it was a little surprising. It's additional complexification, I would say, of the platform and the tooling. And to me, one of the big appeals was the cross-platform nature of it. But and furthermore, although this is the direction they're heading in, they don't really, they will eventually essentially delist the stuff that's out there today, and it seems like there's a splintering that's imminent to some extent.
Splitting into separate repos for the sub projects actually makes sense to me, given a project that I help on did similar. Just where the level of organization at which a GitHub repo is the right object is not the entire program project effort frequently. So I wouldn't be too concerned there.
So I did wonder, and I'll try and make an addendum on this to sort of, that will be a slide or two on just how that came about, and maybe it isn't an abandonment, and maybe it isn't sort of a prioritizing of some and kind of a delisting of others, putting at risk. Are they putting at risk or decommitting platform support for any of these different languages? So I'll try and get more on that. But good point, Bill. I definitely see what you're saying. Anyways, 2023 is definitely going to be a significant year for this, it seems. At Google, and it's going to be taking place throughout the year. And as you can see by the TBAs and the not started, it's expected Q2 sort of stuff. This stuff is happening now as we speak, and so it's obviously in flux. But that's kind of a cool time to jump in and try things out. What you got to do though is you really have to kind of follow things as they develop. If you want to get into this early stage, I just thought this was kind of a neat up in the upper right hand corner. Essentially the definition of the cryptographic function being a map, and for anybody who's done any of this kind of old time math stuff, the thought of looking at cryptography as kind of an infinite set of, involving an infinite set with randomness and, infinite bit strings and that's, I guess I kind of wish they taught me that stuff in my math days. So then I started and got somewhat seduced into this Noster stuff. And as John, I think, could attest, I think the way we did it was we set it up as the Google Tink talk, and then this Noster thing came along. I'm guessing it was around, I'd have to go back and look at the emails, but around the beginning of the year. And so there's this, you can see in the upper left-hand corner, this Fiat Jaff guy, and I think it's a guy from what I can gather. Don't know exactly what country or part of the world he's in, but this was really my first endeavor into. So on the one hand, obviously Google is just gigantic, and on the other hand, this person Fiat Jaff, it appears to be literally one person who was the architect of this Noster stuff. And the beauty of Noster is it's essentially it's kind of what I was looking to try and do with some of the messaging, using encryption in limited ways for signing or encrypting or identifying. And so what he did, and maybe a year or so ago, it's just one guy at work, and he came up with a specification for this protocol for communicating, simple streamed messages. And it became really kind of a hot topic right around the time Twitter was being acquired by, was being acquired. We'll leave it at that. And because as people were essentially beginning to realize or believe or, spread the word that, well, are we kind of safe with Twitter, or is somebody going to be controlling what we can say and who can say it? And are people going to start disappearing from Twitter without, involuntarily? So Noster, this was only a very recent thread that, as you can see, this guy, Fiat Jeff, posted it. And he's a self-deprecating guy. He's brutally, brutally is not the right word, but he's very transparent, very honest, and extremely informative in the things that he occasionally posts. And he's written a lot of beautiful code from what I can see. He's kind of multilingual. The early stuff that he did that I caught on to was in Go. Anyways, so he points to this in a way that, and this is something that if Bill hasn't already noted it, it'll quickly come out, because all of a sudden we're drawn into the realm of cryptocurrencies, right? So cryptocurrencies, no matter what you think, and Bill, I think, will have good things to say, informative things to say. It's integral to this is cryptography, right? And just, big number theory, call it what you will. But so going down this path, they start talking about things like securing one's identity. And for anybody who's used social media, I won't ask for a show of hands, but the question of identity comes up, and, do you own your own identity, and so forth and so on. So, here's a number. I should have gone back. You've seen it now, so going back. But there are 1.1 billion people who are not able to formally prove their identity, in Africa and Asia. I mean, that is pretty, astounding. What does it mean, and how do you come about? So, many of us, the identity is online, right? What's your Facebook? What's your Twitter? What's your, Gmail address, or pick your topic. And so that's generally what's known as federated identities. And Bill, you might even talk about Mastodon. And I'd love to see a show of hands on that or in the chat. So basically, when Twitter, apologies if you know this, but when Twitter was bought out, people started disappearing in droves, or in some significant amounts, because of what was going on. And so and a lot of people who migrated, who they weren't going to go to Facebook for various reasons. Many people who migrated to Mastodon, or they tried to. And Bill has good experience, knowledgeable experience in that realm. And the problem with Mastodon is, in some we can get to that. So this slide is actually, this was 10 years from now, people will look back on this day, this slide, this communication, and I would project it'll be a turning point in the history of messaging communications. So this guy Jack, who people know as having had something to do with Twitter and a few other successful business startups, he caught on to, when he was at Twitter, he was one of the advocates for essentially an open protocol Twitter. I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that or has questions, let me know. But I don't know if it was a year or two before Twitter was sold, but the work had already begun to essentially have an open protocol based Twitter. And Blue Sky is the name that, is kind of a code name, a project name. And then the purchase acquisition came up, people scattered, and Jack kind of spun off that Blue Sky project into a startup with a handful of talented people, and they went to work. They had involvement in the pre-Twitter, in the earlier Twitter days, but then it carried on, and it's a small group of people, and they were taking different open source technologies and working them together into an open source messaging protocol. Okay. And then all of a sudden, Jack catches on. Well, he's sprinkling money around, and a lot of it turned out to be sort of in crypto monies. And do people know what a SAT is? So an SAT is sort of I think the smallest. It's like a penny in cryptocurrency, right? It's the smallest. It's a Satoshi. I think it's the smallest amount that's transactable. And so Jack Dorsey had a pretty big investment fund, and he was sprinkling the money around to sort of do good, hopeful, startup, innovative kinds of businesses. And significant amounts of what he did, I think were in Asia and Africa for different reasons. And anyways, he heard about this Nostr stuff, and he invested, and that was an absolute turning point in what at least I see as sort of the beginning, the birth of a new what do they call it in the .com days? Killer app. This might be a killer protocol. So I'll spin over this because some people might not like to talk about Bitcoin. This is a great example, though, of the risks that are at hand. So Nostr is this technology that, in the simplest way to look at it, you've got a private key and a public key. So it's like the stuff that people are familiar with here for public encryption stuff, the RSA stuff, at scale. So you've got a public key and a private key, and the way you create them is it's derived from the Bitcoin cryptocurrency realm where they have their own kinds of cryptographic algorithms, right? And we won't get into it. I don't know enough about it, but it's, I'll say this, it seems to work. It's straightforward. It's easy to use, and it's integral to this Noster thing. Okay. So one of the questions is, okay, well, so effectively in Noster, your identity becomes a key pair, and you've got a public key and you've got a private key, and that, you know, the question is, how do you tie that public key private key pair to your real identity? So they describe this out of band, and, you know, explaining that it relies on external identities. So for instance, one of the things I can do is I can put my identity, my descriptive name, and you know, my everyday name on a website somewhere that I own or anybody owns in a well-known location, map it to my public key, and that kind of connects the dots. People were
So,
using, any
are you
questions?
going to describe how this is different from PGP, which has the same failure mode Gandalf had on the previous slide, and we're trying to get rid of? This sounds like they've just rebranded PGP so far.
So, so a couple of things. PGP, of course, was you know, an application with the specific sort of usage model, and Noster is kind of a protocol-based thing where the dream scenario is using the protocol to spin up a bunch of different applications. A key element of this is sort of a relay-based thing. And Bill, I forget if you and I talked specifically about this, but the idea is that there are relays which are basically dumb relays. It's kind of like, you know, almost email servers that from which where you send messages, and then, you know, messages get sent on and passed around. So
Yeah,
to
that's
the extent
how it used to work. Yeah, that's how
Yeah,
it even worked when PGP was invented.
so
You're not succeeding in differentiating.
well, it's interesting. I mean, I'll be honest with you, and I haven't read everything there is to read about Noster, and I wasn't there from the beginning, and you know, I'm not the most up to the minute on it since, but nobody has nobody's ever likened it to PGP. So in any way, shape, or form, and I do think, and I've been upfront and honest, despite knowing Bill's going to skewer me, that there are a lot of seeding technologies, concepts, which you know, overlapping technology sets that with roots in cryptocurrency types of things. And I mean, I'm not disputing it, and I don't know enough about PGP other than having the early books that were written to say. But so look, I certainly widely accept it, and we're going to get into a few more slides down the road here that sort of recognize this as one of the big problems. In fact, I think it was, I don't know if it was that maybe I already said it here. There's a story in here. Oh, well, it was actually on this slide. And one of the, when Jack put money on the table, he basically gave it to Fiat Jeff. And Fiat Jeff, who seems, you know, more interested in the technology than the money end of things in some respects, but very quickly shared it with the guy who had lots of knowledge and experience in kind of some of the earlier cryptocurrency stuff, and was very involved in the Noster stuff. And so they split it more with Fiat Jeff working on the protocol side, and this guy working on the application side. And so they started to spread little bits of money around. And along the way, one of this talks more about the people who are, you know, sort of untrackable or untracked. And, you know, it's one thing, it's kind of good, I suppose, for some people to go undercover and not be identifiable. But on the other hand, there's a real downside for the people who need to be identified and cannot be, whether it's the unbanked or, it's kind of a real sort of societal thought. A lot of, though, what came from this, and this will go to the Mastodon question, not to move away from PGP too fast, but what people found, and there are a number of examples of this, Mastodon essentially is the kind of thing where people set up, it really is reminiscent of the old BBS world that some of us have earlier roots in, and where it's run by a sysop, for those who haven't heard that phrase in a while. And if you sort of invest in that platform, a lot of people, it seems, have experienced this with Twitter recently. You invest a lot in it, and then somebody pulls the technological rug out from under you, right? And the purpose of this slide is to show that if you don't own it, the domain, all your content, your intellectual property, but even more so, your ability to communicate can be seized. So the question really is, what are NIPs? And it's obviously a play on words here, but I don't know if people knew that some places around the state have outlawed these little nip bottles, which people have complained as being littering, problematic towards littering. But the NIPs, if you don't know what NIPs are, maybe you do know what BIPs are. Do you know what BIPs are? So they're on the Bitcoin side of things, and so the NIPS Nostr implementation possibilities, essentially, and you can't see all of the things on the left-hand side, but there's specifications, and it's not like the Worldwide Web Consortium where they have a really formal process. It's much more a Linuxy kind of flavored thing where one or two people are really the ones who are the benevolent dictators for the protocol in this case, even though they may really not want to be a benevolent dictator, right? So all of these things are readily available for review and comment, and generally they come accompanied with some code component, right? So here's another thing that may or may not be a PGP similarity, but it's again, it's the risk of losing or having imposter identities out there once they get your keys, and sort of how do you deal with that, right? I'm sorry, this is the slide I was actually looking for earlier when Bill talked about Gandalf. So this JB55, he's the guy that got the other half of Jack's in sort of venture, early stage capital support, and I'll have to update this with how exactly he lost his Twitter account, but anyways, he what this guy did is he's I think in Canada, and he built for those people who are on the Macintosh side of things, he built a Nostr client which functions in accord with the Nostr protocol, and a select number of those NIPs, the specifications. It's somewhat reminiscent, for better or for worse, of the earlier days of browsers, where and JavaScript, where different browsers would implement different functions and technologies. Well, anyways, different clients in the Nostr space and servers, similarly, in the Nostr space, implement different types of functionality. So the specification is there, and whether or not you implement that functionality, for instance, I'm glad. Okay, so I'm glad that was off the record.
We're back on.
All right, good, thanks. So the slide on the right here, which is number 18 in this monstrous thread. One of the beauties, back to the cryptography topic, back to the Tink stuff, back to the actually even frankly,
There could be some problem. Let me just troubleshoot it for a second.
even back to the and if it's not recording, that's okay. But the pretty good privacy stuff, right? The beauty of this is that you really can, with minimal coding effort, jump in and actually do useful things with cryptography. And by useful things to me, it's like signing documents, verifying the signer, encrypting messages, transmitting those messages someplace, storing them into a database, retrieving them, and decrypting them. So that
is on.
good. I think we're connected. What was that the extent to which people became familiar with, with these online technologies? And I think Bill and I maybe even did address this. So, not only is it a risk, well, associated with the risk of losing things, the question is, what do you do and how do you do it when you do inevitably lose the keys, right? And in the case,
hold on a minute, Brian.
Say that again.
I'm not receiving anything on YouTube. Is somebody else monitoring YouTube?
I had been, but I stopped. I can check again.
Yeah.
I seem to be hearing you fine.
YouTube.
Can you hear that?
I had been, but I stopped. I can check again.
Yeah.
I seem to be hearing you fine.
Yeah, it sounds like somebody's got a background recording on.
Yeah, it's got a long delay, and somebody.
Yeah, I was doing that around the phone just to figure out it was playing.
I'm seeing.
Live streaming is on.
So I was hearing it just fine on YouTube.
Yeah, maybe they well, anyways, it says live streaming's on now, so we can roll with that. But the discussion that we did have is this, the encryption key life cycle, and Bill may think this is, or anyone else may think this is too simplistic, but it really is pretty. And these basically are unanswered questions in the spirit of the PGP discussion. But there's no doubt about it. People understand that these are issues that need to be resolved, and it's one of these slides in which they point out, interestingly enough, and that if you lose some of your keys, your crypto keys, well, you lose some of your cash. But on the other hand, if you've got one key that has essentially all of your digital identity of content and 20 years of photos, and you lose it all, you end up that guy looking for the hard drive that had his crypto keys on it. I don't know if you heard that. I forget, was he offering $75 million for people who could find it in the local town dump? Or I might be off by a factor, but he was offering a lot of money. So right now there's no scheme that I've seen for key rotation, revocation, issuance. All of these things are really at the beginning, but there are a lot of smart people who are thinking about this, and it seems they really want to do this right, because they really believe and feel that this is really important, not just for something like Noster, but in terms of people's ability to continue to communicate using, essentially technologies that where people can't pull the technological rug out from under them. So I don't know if people have ever heard of this particular, form of encryption, the curve that it uses. I'm definitely not familiar enough to even speak of it generally. But what I will say is the code has been implemented. It is widely used. The underlying coding primitives, and so it's at least not going to talk about zero knowledge proofs. I mean, the idea is that, how can you use the, sort of limited information to identify and confirm who an individual is. But, some people say that's kind of the future, right? I won't get into the curves. Maybe Bill will talk about this stuff. The beauty of, on the left-hand side, at least, of those functions of verifying or signing or, key generation. The beauty of this Noster stuff is you can go in, and if you believe that the cryptographers knew what they were doing when they developed these encryption schemes, the underlying libraries are very easy to use, and at least in Go, there's really been a remarkable proliferation of platform prototyping. That's a lot of P's, but remarkable proliferation of platform prototyping for Noster on Go, JavaScript, using JavaScript. Rust is kind of one of the most enthusiastic subgroups of developers working on this Noster stuff. One guy doing it at the client level, and a number of people doing it, using it, implementing it for the relay, which is kind of like it's a WebSocket based server in essence. And the vast majority of these proofs of concept, demonstration, working applications are open source. And there's a great deal of innovation in and around, the question on the relays, which is kind of one of the questions on the Mastodon servers, which is why one of the answers has been centralization and concentration of big businesses, right? Because you do have to maintain servers, and you do have to assemble people with the talent and the ability beyond this, group that we have here tonight, maybe, who can do some of this stuff on their own. And so that tends to lead to a concentration. So the remarkable, set of opportunities out there to work with these different languages is pretty cool. So identity, we're all tied up in the crypto curves. Elliptic curve technology is a whole specialty that other people are better to talk about than I am. The beauty of this Noster, and this is where it gets into it almost starts to bleed into the realms of cryptocurrency, and the level 1 stuff, which is on the blockchain, and then the level 2 stuff, they talk about the Lightning protocol and Zaps and these other ways of people are weaving into the identity, the DNA of Noster, the different ways of giving thumbs up, right? So it's not just the thumbs up, but it's one of these little zaps that gives you a little bit of a very small fractional amount of money, essentially. This decentralized ID solution stuff, it's out there. It's at the W3C site. My recollection is the big browsers companies voted against this decentralized ID thing. I guess Mozilla most actively. I think ultimately Google sort of fell in with it, but the DIDs that's again early stages. I don't know what PGP used for identity. Did Bill? Did you? Were there? It was pretty good. It was the kind of thing. It was like more of an add-on to existing email systems. It didn't provide the whole.
The identity was your key and your email address, which were tied together by sending returning the signatures in the web at trust back to the email. So as with either Mastodon or Noster, proof of identity by demonstrating you control a URL, It's a limited degree of identity, but it's what limited identity there is verified. So
It it really doesn't seem like it should be that hard a problem. I
oh,
just
identity is a very hard problem
it,
because for some purposes you need government certified identities, and for other purposes you need very anonymous identities that the government people with hobnail boots can't map to an actual person to come kick their door in their face in. There's a wide range of identity solutions required, and it's not one size fits all. That's why it
right.
hasn't been solved yet.
So they, and they, and those are some of the underlying motivators, right? The same reason that some of the underlying motivators of cryptocurrencies are, the idea of people being independent and being able to, in some sense, decouple from and one of the big driving anonymity, right, of in transactions. There are probably others people have in mind, but some of the stuff driving the Noster sort of bandwagon is part of it is maybe the ability to communicate anonymously, but it seems an overriding technological architectural motivator on this is censorship resistance. So there's been a lot of talk about what the Twitter algorithm is in terms of how things are selected and what you get. And it's like with the Facebook feed, what is the algorithm by which you see, I don't know what they did recently in the last 6 months, but it in the last 3 months, it seems like that for the Facebook usage I have, I'm getting way more Facebook, friend suggestions, right? And it's actually become more transparent as to how they're making these recommendations or these referrals or these connections. But anyways, the whole censorship resistance thing and what the algorithm is for presenting and sharing information, because most of these relays in Noster are open, you choose who you follow, and it tends to be more of you can filter. And in those nips that it talks about, it's relatively simple protocol in terms of and beautifully tied together, but it is censorship resistant. This one you can see the date on this is February 6th. And this is how misinformation, I suppose, get out there. But and I mean, they say, what's Noster? The Jack Dorsey backed social network. So generally speaking, people in the development community, although I see it as a potential social networking component, but they don't really see it, I don't think, as a social network. It is backed by Jack Dorsey in the sense that he did put money on the table, which has allowed them to essentially incentivize through various, hey, if somebody implements this, we'll pass this along. But it's I don't know if his other startup is still, but I'm sure it's still moving along. But I just saw this headline and it's like, wow. Okay, so here actually is NIP1, which is the first specification element, and you can get by with just implementing a couple of these things, and for all of these there seems to be code floating around in a language that you are probably familiar with, and it's a pretty neat way to go. So not only are they using keys and encryption for your identity and for your essentially your user name and key pair, but they also use it to of course, for signing and verification and identification uniquely of the each and every event, which is routinely signed, and then if you send the equivalent of a direct message encrypted, then it's encrypted, and it's easy enough to have done enough where I was able to get the relay up and running. Some of the relays have Postgres databases in the back end or SQL databases in the back end. So for somebody who's looking to string together, a messaging slash, database slash relay communications platform, which might be useful in certain small business or big business or project related activities. This has a lot of different directions that it can go in. And then, so this talks about, the communication between the clients and relays. Again, really pretty basic formats, basic JSON arrays. You can get to be pretty good at JSON pretty quick if you aren't already. It's fairly well spelled out in all of this. So, the bottom line is, if you have a specific, bank account application kind of thing, maybe you need to hire cryptographic specialists to make sure that you get all the stuff right. But and maybe libraries like Tink and all its different platforms, if they continue to be supported, I think this does raise questions about, okay, what happens when these cryptographic libraries, implementations are no longer supported? The open source stuff that I think kind of talked about last time a little bit, this idea of the risk of involved in using a portfolio of open source components, and the burdens on the application provider when the open source team project goes away or splinters or disintegrates, which there's a lot of heavy lifting to keep these things running. So the question becomes, well, how do you will there be more natural end of life declarations for open source built projects in the future because they become unsupportable? And the beauty of this Nostr stuff is the simplicity. And just for a note to end on, if there are any questions, and for Bill's Minority Report to kick in, but the beauty of this is that it seems simple enough, but also robust enough, sort of cryptographically, that it's got legs to be around for a long time. So arguably the simplicity of this Nostr protocol and the open source nature of it, and the fact that you can really get in and tinker with this stuff. You can write code. You can challenge yourself to maybe learn some new technologies and skills. That I think that's a recipe for not only widespread innovation, which is what Jack, and of course Jack's signature interest in this. He was certainly one of the first people to get of any public notability to get Nostr keys, and he posted it to Twitter, and people started to follow him, and so the combination of recognizable name, even de minimis kind of investment, but also a technology that is straightforward enough and apparently robust enough that it can be spun out in many different ways. I think it's got a recipe for success in the future. It's not just Linux, but it is open source. Clearly it runs well in mostly I've used it in the Linux environment, and the hesitancy, and this is where I'll turn it over to Bill if there are no questions, but is that there is a lot of interest or overlapping talent which is in the cryptocurrency space, and I think we'll see more and more applications where there's kind of hybrid development work that goes on. You can do Nostr stuff without the crypto. You can do crypto without the Nostr stuff, but we are seeing, the Venn diagrams on these things is more overlap. So any questions or thoughts?
It was interesting. Of course, I was trying to fix this stupid live streaming. Finally got it corrected.
Good.
Seems to be several minutes behind on my screen, but I'm not going to worry about that.
Yeah, it sounded like it was. Well, I'll be honest with you, and honestly, Jerry, thanks for saying that, because that really is the message that that I think is worth getting out there. That this is interesting and it's actionable, right? So, anyone with the interest, I think, can take action. And in the links that are in some of the slides, and I'll add some more before I send them along to John to share. But there's beautiful, there's essentially fully crafted, from my experience, pretty, reliable, robust relay server code. So it also opens up the door to, learning more about WebSockets and these other things that, but also they've spun out a couple different relay types where, there's just kind of an open relay, no charges associated with it. There's another relay that filters based on kind of whitelisted keys. And there's another relay, and actually, this guy Fiat, Jeff, had sort of given the blueprint on it for a pay-as-you-go relay. And I don't think it's purely commercial. I don't think it's at all, commercially driven to make necessarily money from it. I think it's more from the standpoint of recognizing, for it to be sustainable, this is another model, right? Which is, it's like the newspaper subscription thing. You pay for it, but then it gives you maybe a less spammy environment, right? They've got other ideas out there on this is one of them: how to cut down on spam, and one way is to charge a small fee, and the sense about the Mastodon problem, which is kind of like the and I think I can legitimately at least relate to this as a one-time one of the old BCS bulletin boards that we were running. It is, if you get an angry sysop who pulls the plug, and that was your connection to a lot of other people, the idea here is that relays are lightweight, easy to set up, and you're always going to be able to find somebody who will essentially be the courier for your messages. So I do think that's the main message. There's something here, and it is pretty interesting.
The Mastodon problem? There's more fear, uncertainty, and doubt FUD in your comments on Mastodon than Microsoft ever deployed against Linux.
I think the Minority Report has begun. There was recently, I might be over zealously responding to it, but there was recently, and Bill, you probably know right offhand, a fairly significant Mastodon server community. It's not just the server; it's a community, right? Where the equivalent to the sysop. What do they call them on Mastodon? The person who runs the
I don't know the specific name. Yes, there was one specific node
right,
where the guy running the node was running into real life issues. He could not continue his node dutifully. He couldn't do what he needed to do to keep it healthy and stay healthy himself. And the community had grown such that his prior neglect at appointing co-operators years ago who would be thus trusted by the whole community on that node for him to turn it over to them, since that hadn't happened, there was no way to build trust in successor operators. He complied with the community agreement that he would give notice before shutting down so people could use the Mastodon Fediverse migration tools to migrate to a new node and take their followers and follows with them to the new node, which preserves their identity. So he followed the compact, did not pull the plug without notice. So it is fear, uncertainty, and doubt to say pull the rug out from underneath. It's nonsense. Yes, it's possible that somebody could have a node crash irrecoverably, and then you wouldn't get the chance to migrate decently. One hopes somebody running a moderately decent sized node knows how to do backups. But the case that you are citing as the problem is proof that the community is healthy and it works. And so it is either ignorance or bad faith to use that as fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I presume you picked this line of reasoning up from your Crypto Bro buddies and have been brainwashed. And okay, I'm sorry, but you're just wrong.
Yeah, so I mean, just to be clear, I mean, wherever I heard it was just kind of, it wasn't any Crypto Bro buddies. It was somewhere in the Twitterverse.
People who tried Mastodon, didn't like it after 20 minutes and left, say all sorts of horrible things. Yeah. I look at BTC Gandalf's posting in this slide deck of yours as somebody who was apparently a knowledgeable member of the Bitcoin community and managed to find just how messed up this new protocol is. And that's ought to be a little bit more convincing than people who aren't using Mastodon's opinion of Mastodon. So far, I haven't heard anything in this presentation that differentiates this from Blue Sky and the AT protocol, except that Jack is funding each of them in competition with each other. Well, good for Jack splashing his money around, I guess. And this one is a spin-off of Bitcoin technology with Bitcoin people, which does not give me confidence in their cryptologic maturity. Competent cryptologers active in Bitcoin would be an interesting Venn diagram and are probably intentionally committing fraud. The people who are involved in Bitcoin or similar crypto coins with the best of intentions would not qualify as cryptologically, mathematically, or financially mature. You can check all that apply. Private keys are easier to mismanage. They've recreated PGP's failure cases. Progress needs to actually progress over the previous solution. This isn't even as good as PGP. PGP are allowed for key rolling and revocation use cases. Not every case you'd like, but some. Protocol with relays, yeah, that's exactly what Usenet was. We didn't used to connect email directly from the starting point to the ending point. Now it's required, and we ban email that flows through relays because that's how you forge addresses. Regarding the SECP 256K1 curve, This is the Bitcoin elliptic curve. ED25519 is a good curve. NIST's curve isn't. And a curve that's endorsed only by Bitcoin's cryptologers, I can't take that any more seriously than the NSA tainted NIST curve. I wouldn't use it for anything that was important. Censorship resistant is a terminology that one hears about, particularly from people who want to censor some people but don't want themselves censored. Most people agree something should be censored. We just can't agree on who should decide and what needs to be censored. If this is censorship resistant, it is probably illegal in the state of Germany. Because if you can't censor pro-Nazi postings, your network cannot go into Germany. I can't say as I'm surprised regarding the Mastodon fear, uncertainty, doubt that the Bitcoin groupthink people have a problem with a community with a plain ice requirement. I'm disappointed that you didn't wind up talking about Tink. I would be interested to know what cryptological libraries are underlying Noster. It sounds like they're Bitcoin libraries as opposed to the Salt Stack or Boring SSL, which Tink is a layer on top of. I'd like to know more about Tink because it doesn't seem to be adequately documented outside of its tiny little universe. But it makes some of the right noises. The important thing is to be using a library like Tink or Salt, which provides big use case APIs as opposed to low-level cryptologic primitives when building applications or protocols. So it sounded like the right sort of thing. There are special dangers of Dunning-Kruger confidence with cryptography. It's been widely quoted in the cryptological world. Most any man can create a cipher that he himself can't solve without the key. This mirage has deluded many otherwise brightest minds, including one Thomas Jefferson. And the unbreakable cipher that Thomas Jefferson invented has been reinvented once per century since then, at a minimum, considered unbreakable each time and broken each time. So, yeah. Get your high-level end-to-end use case cryptology libraries from people that really know what they're doing. Google is probably good enough. They're making the right sorts of noises. Tracking is a dangerous word. Identity is a dangerous word. Activism requires anonymous commenting for the protections of the disadvantaged. The real problem comes when the advantaged use anonymity to punch down without consequence. And then the advantaged will complain about their victims punching up. I do still wonder who Satoshi Nakamoto, Bitcoin inventor, really was. If he indeed was a single person, he had some real math chops, but seriously oversold the anonymity probably. Oversold the anonymity property. Easy for you to say. So Satoshi probably wasn't an actual information security person, even though he, she, or they had cryptographic mathematical knowledge. Unless, of course, it was intentional, malicious indirection, and the whole thing's a setup by certain government agencies. Always a possibility. If we hadn't built Facebook in a Harvard dorm to get pictures of co-eds to snark about, the CIA probably would have had to have had their vulture capital arm created to get people to overshare their personal informations to scrape. They didn't have to do it because horny undergraduates did it for them. There are a bunch of things that they haven't had to do because the free market has gone and done something dangerous for them. Which is why it surprises me that they tinkered with the NIST curve so deliberately after they'd been vindicated that they'd strengthened DES as opposed to weakened it. They then ruined NIST's reputation for independence in the more recent decade. It's really sad.
Yeah, criticism noted and welcomed. You're certainly welcome to go to the extent that you've got an appetite for it. The Google Tink site seems clean and well documented, and I certainly have not dug into the cryptological primitives there.
And you shouldn't want to or need to.
Right.
What concerns me is the lack of discussion about Tink in professional cryptological circles outside of the project so far. It's not listed on the comparison of libraries on Wikipedia. Bruce Schnarr hasn't commented on it, so that there are no independent review comments. So it's in my mind, it's still at the phase of first publication, no replication studies, no peer review journal articles. But the internal documentation by Google is saying the right things. You can substitute a FIPS 140-2 kernel into it. You can build it to be restricted to only FIPS approved implementations and protocols if you're living in that environment. So they're saying the right things. That doesn't, and Google has some of the best cryptology people that are working inside a big corp. So there's some reason to be hopeful. It wraps around boring SSL, which is a good fork of OpenSSL, which gives us 2 feet so that if one of them fails, the other works, which is hallelujah. This is a great thing.
One thing I'm curious about, I wonder if are YubiKeys still relevant? And if so, are they usually integrated into the like this Nostr or the Google Tink thing?
So Bill can continue on, John, but it's I kind of have the same question. So I mean, what the keys are you talk about? It's really nothing more than a hardware device that you plug in, and it's got the information on it, right? And I mean, I know I bought some maybe 4 or 5 years ago for $80 a pop. I don't know. I mean, I think more and more people have gone to some variation of a software application. And Bill, I think you and I almost talked about this recently, with some sense of that the software applications were insufficient or ineffective. But so I think it basically is just a hardware key, and I don't know that there's anything more to it than that.
Oh, it's more subtle than that, but you know, different use cases require different solutions. So YubiKeys are good for some things. Um, uh, Storing your private key only on a USB drive that's on your keychain is another solution. The software applications are another solution. Some people are absolutely hostile to ever using text messaging as a second factor because high value targets can be SIM jacked. But for low value targets, it's a affordable and ubiquitous platform um, that has a high enough cost of attack for low value targets that it's actually decent. Just when people use it for moderate to high value targets, it becomes dangerous to have an own goal.
So is the key that John inquired about, is it more of a two-factor authentication device,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
is it more of a storage device for keys, or both?
It's actually it's actually a hardware implementation of a one-time password thing
That's like, which makes it like a two-factor. It's a kind of two-factor.
So it's not really a key wallet, and that's not meant to be a trade word.
No,
for Bill.
it's a different thing than a wallet.
Yeah.
Having private keys stored under a passphrase on a USB drive is more wallety.
Yeah.
And there are two different solutions go into two different USB slots.
So John, I don't know, does that answer it? So I guess the question is there still a role? And basically Bill was saying it depends on the application.
There should be a role, and the question then is, it is Noster or Tink, either of your two topics, still supporting that technology as one of the multi-factor choices.
Well, I and to continue on in that direction, I don't mean to be dismissive of Mastodon, and to the extent that I have tried it somewhat, one of the criticisms I think, which I would argue is the same. Nostra has the same problem, arguably, which is on the one hand, is in contrast to something like Twitter. The Mastodon stuff tends to kind of coagulate around communities, right? Communities of interest. And so the question becomes, how do you bridge the air gap to other communities? And so, there are protocols for doing this. I don't know how widely they are used, but so I just want to give one example of somebody who I have kind of followed on Twitter, remarkably knowledgeable. They have a website, kind of a WordPressy sort of thing, but custom built. By far one of the best bloggy type things in terms of sharing files and communications I have seen. They had a strong presence on Twitter, and then with the acquisition, things got a little questionable. So people went, in their mind, they went looking for alternatives. So this is I would say, one of the most successful, individuals who's not a gigantic, top 10 superstar. Anyways, their Twitter profile has them with over 300,000 followers. So, not a small group, and over 5,000 people that they're following. So they're active, right? Their Mastodon presence, and this is somebody who is active commercially, takes donations, if not, some other form of subscription. On Mastodon, they currently have, basically about a tenth of both of those levels of activity, of followers and following.
I've heard similar numbers from journalists who say that despite their number of followers on Mastodon being a tenth the size, they get better engagement from their smaller audience there, which may indicate that there's uh, far fewer bots among their followers.
Yeah, and I mean it's a good, so this is what I'm going to do to address, Bill's concern. I'm going to reach out to this person and see if I can get them to give me the lowdown, because they clearly have a sophisticated, multi-platform, multi-tiered approach and to communicating, right, both on the output and the input, and see if I can get kind of a comparison of the Twitter sphere versus the Mastodon sphere and some of the pros and cons. The Noster stuff is I'm not saying that it is the solution in nirvana, and I'm definitely not saying Mastodon is not the way to go. And I wasn't cherry picking the successes or failures. I mean, people right up front will tell you honestly, Noster is too nascent to do anything of use with it, right? So to go so far as to say that it's kind of the they're concerned about censorship, but it's so young that it's too early to pick any to pick it apart, frankly, because it's picking itself apart. The beauty of it, though,
funding a stalking horse so that there's competition between Blue Sky and Noster is brilliant. Backing both of them, they spur each other on, and if either of them wins, he looks brilliant.
I agree. No, and with that point, I completely agree. This is smart technological portfolio management from his standpoint. It's smart financial management from his standpoint, and it seems to me he may be less concerned about which one wins. He just really wants somebody to win in this space, because I think he probably does believe that there are a lot of people out there who need to have these tools available, and so we need somebody to win.
It's also possible that they may work for different niches or different use cases. I mean, Mastodon is not a drop-in replacement for Twitter. It does not. The community is intentionally different, and some people have been really offended at being told they were expected to behave as less of a jerk over there than they did on Twitter, and have either left in a huff or been an even more of a jerk because they were upset at being called on being a jerk. And well, if you don't want to stop being a jerk when you leave Twitter, maybe you should stay on Twitter. Oh,
yeah. Well, it's
that's an impersonal use of the pronoun you, but anyone who wants to take it personally is welcome to do so.
Yeah, the other thing is just to put another iron on the fire here and see if I can, if we can have another vigorous. I would assert, and I'm welcome to hear from anyone to suggest otherwise, whether you believe in cryptocurrencies or not, whether you believe in, Satoshi was a real person, or, was just some kind of AI bot that came up with this thing from the, whether you believe that they worked for
AI bot is even crazier. Okay.
Yeah,
hadn't heard that one.
Yeah, or they work for this government or that government, or and they whatever you believe. I would assert that cryptocurrency today is one of the most widely used implementations and applications for any kind of cryptographic application software, in the world. Now,
well, that may be the silliest thing you've said in 10 years.
You think that's the silliest thing I've said in 10 years?
It's in the running. All right.
Well,
there are very few emails sent or delivered that aren't single, double, or treble encrypted today. So the web pages are almost all transmitted encrypted today. So that saying that Bitcoin and friends are bigger than email and the World Wide Web is just risible.
Well, your point is
So you're reaching for straws and you're failing to get a straw.
your point is well taken on the email and the web. Of course, I'm
I
not
think-
going to.
I think this is of popularity versus quality.
Well, it's a different application.
You have quality cryptography on the web and email, and the web and email do seem to be popular. What you have with crypto coins is you have fanatical belief in a solution in search of a problem. And so you have people yelling about how wonderful it is, except when they accidentally send their wallet to the landfill and similar.
And I don't know if people are using the fairly recently introduced Apple encryption stuff, where you can flip a switch on your cloud account and everything is so that's another one. And so let me, if I could at least modify the silliest thing that I've said in the last 10 years, which is the innovation, the attempt to innovatively use and come up with new applications using encryption. So for instance, I totally agree, Bill, you knocked me out with the email, and you double knocked me out with obviously SSL and stuff like that, right? And Apple with encryption, and I mean all this stuff, it's widespread, but it's generally speaking. Give me another example. I mean, PGP, you tell me if I'm overstating this, but it didn't seem to win too many usability awards, did it?
Right.
So
that is its and security software which has a usability problem is a security problem.
And
this is why I'm no longer recommending it.
Right. And we're kind of in a space now where and maybe this is a defensible position, which is to claim that the ability to innovate in some application space in a way that's cryptolog that can use encryption in sort of new and innovative ways. It just seems to me that there's something there. And again, on the Mastodon thing, I've used it very little, far less than Bill conveys, but it I mean, some of the Bitcoin stuff, of course, it's, how old is it now? Is it 14 years old or it's more than a decade old. So it's not.
It's running into its planned obsolescence.
So, but is that also true of the underlying, cryptography stuff, or is that more on some of the architecture of chains?
The planned scarcity built into Bitcoin, combined with its proof of work, it's running up against a built-in limit that was considered a brilliant solution to a design problem that has other issues. And when you get into global warming, suddenly, unless you're capable of getting electric power for free because you've installed your Bitcoin miner on a compromised server you found on the network someplace, gets expensive. But the novel applications, so far, South Sea Island bubbles and Ponzi schemes as digital products is novel in a sense, but it's not really new.
So another one to add to Bill's column of obviousness, WhatsApp, right? I mean, if I presume most people have used it, or to me, it's a remarkable application, and one of the most remarkable developments that, I mean, it runs on your computer, it runs on your phones. It's and I don't know how Bill, you might have first heard about it, but I first heard about it from people who had lots of international, exposure. So that's where they get started, first off. And of course, encryption was integral to it, and has, it's been kind of a good test bed of user-facing technology where encryption kicks in. So, point taken. I do think the beauty of the one of the interesting parts of the Nostr stuff is cryptography, encryptable stuff. Encryption it's kind of like a feature that you can easily roll in and work with. And I from a development standpoint, I think that's hard to come. I think I'm not coming up with other application spaces where a developer can kind of integrate encryption stuff in their application. And while it's true, the backbone stuff you talk about, the infrastructure stuff you talk about, encryption at rest.
You've got an excellent point there, that it is very difficult to retrofit security into release 2 of anything. So starting with security in the protocol to begin with is a major advantage. Boy, are we wishing we'd put security into the internet DNS protocol day one, because retrofitting it is a nightmare. The phone company trusted everybody that was connected to the long line trunks, so accepted unsigned caller ID on long distance calls. Now anybody with voice over IP can forge whatever phone number they want when they're cold calling you with advertising calls, because security wasn't built in from day one. So yeah, absolutely, that's an advantage. Now, if only the security was being designed for Nostr by the people doing the security for Tink, so that I could believe that it was better than what they built into Bitcoin, their previous product, then you'd have something. The fact that this is coming from the same people as Bitcoin is not a fabulous endorsement, in my view. Take a look at the anonymity promises that the Bitcoin community made, and how well that's held up in criminal prosecutions for people who went and used Bitcoin for their drug deals, and they're getting convicted. The promises made about the security of Bitcoin, there's no there.
Yeah, but I didn't believe there was ever there from the beginning, and I was kind of there in the beginning, at least.
Well,
in terms
good. You may be brighter than the average crypto bro.
Well, yeah, but it wasn't
the average crypto bro. I'm just saying that this is a community whose cryptographic maturity has proved to be inadequate, and so trusting them with the development of the next great thing seems sketchy to me.
Yeah, but the thing is, and I'll have to, it's been a while since I read the books, but I got to pull them up. But there are a couple of great books out there about, basically how they track down, who was the guy out in California who had the Silk Road thing, right? And there are a couple of other really big ones. None of the things that I've seen, and you may know more, none of them have had to do anything with breaking the cryptographic primitives that are built in.
You don't have to break the cryptographic primitives. The anonymity promise based on the cryptographic primitives was horseshit.
Yeah, but I agree. But that, at least from everything I know, and I'm not convinced by anything you've said.
The money laundering prosecutions
Yeah.
where people split their transactions up and swirled them around.
Yeah.
Oh, well, they still got prosecuted.
Yeah, and again, and I'm not looking obviously to defend that or advocate. And what do they have? They had tumblers is what they, and I mean it's it. Anyways, I'll include in
I'm
the slide.
saying the promised capabilities were not delivered.
Yeah, but it had nothing to do with the encryption schemes.
Well, no.
It
The
had everything to do
encryption
with.
scheme was claimed to provide certain properties.
Yeah, but that
And this was widely published, and it was relied upon by criminals who didn't have the math chops to understand that it was horseshit. And
Yeah.
so, for the same community to be making privacy, identity, security promises about this new system built on the same libraries, is should not be taken as reassuring of the how well the promises will be implemented this time.
Yeah, but again, and I'll include a slide on this with the slides I sent to John. Nothing to do with the encryption primitives. Everything to do with all the stuff around it. Nostr is not claiming to be, while it's claiming to be censorship resistant. What they mean by that is you can't pull the relay server out from under him because people just go to another one. But I don't see anything that claims that they're working to give more people access, but nobody's promising that anonymity and in fact people have pointed out pretty clearly in a way that's reminiscent of the crypto stuff that there are so many tweaks in and around this isn't Tor. And even with Tor, right? People figure out ways to
Tor has
figure out.
its own problems.
Yeah, exactly. So I do think it's I would love to see the cryptographic primitives of this versus that, but again, if RSA breaks, I think you hear about it. If these elliptic curves things break, we should be hearing about it. If any of the stuff in the Tink library breaks, maybe we'll hear about it. So
nobody serious is publishing analyses of the Bitcoin chosen elliptic curve because nobody in the serious cryptologic. But until the professionals look at it, we don't know. And when you say it's not the primitives, you're correct. Most breaks in modern cryptography are not breaks in the primitives, but in the way they're combined in the protocol, the way they're initialized, the way keys are stored. There have been some primitives that were just so crap they were quickly broken, but those don't wind up in wide scale usage. They're just become problems at the back of the textbook chapter.
Right. So here's one of the books that I'll put out there. Tracers in the Dark. Has anybody heard of that? It's got Andy Greenberg. The global hunt for the crime lords of cryptocurrency. And so there are a couple of businesses that spun up essentially to do blockchain analysis, which now Bill, you kind of raised an interesting thought, right? Which is that some of these things, RSA, public key encryption, other people knew how to do that in secret places in the government before they did, right? And,
there were public key concept was understood, but I don't think it was the RSA. I think it was knapsack or similar.
So indeed, maybe the primitives that we speak so confidently of not having broken. I mean, maybe there are some that the people who are the really knowledgeable experts in this stuff know about, and they're just, it's more advantageous to not disclose it. So
You want books. These are the books you want to start with.
so anyways, I don't know, maybe we can end on a point of disagreement or agreement, but it's endlessly interesting. And I think I regret not having done more with the Tink, but I'll work up some kind of a demo to include and distribute. But there's a lot that can be done kind of with some of these other innovative technologies, and whether it's the next great startup out of the Twitter, genealogy, or somebody that we haven't heard of yet. It's kind of an exciting time. That's
If you
for
get
sure.
a genealogy application for it, talk to me.
Say that again,
If you get a genealogy application, talk to me.
John.
Hey,
What was that?
Can you put those books you mentioned in the chat? And Bill, can you put the ones you showed in the chat as well?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. There's one other one. It escapes me right now, but these are unbelievably fascinating. Well, they're incredibly fascinating books that speak to exactly what Bill was talking about in detail, and the fascinating, kind of, chase and it's interesting because it does address, some of just the general basic end user flaws in difficulties and challenges in bringing this stuff about. But at the end of the day, the encryption is just math, and but actually making it sort of useful in your daily life is much more complicated, I guess. So anyways, I'll let Bill, if he wants to have the last word. But John and Jerry and others, thank you very much, and I'll put that book in the chat. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
Thanks, I appreciate it a lot.
Andy, sorry you couldn't get a word in one. You have to unmute.
I had a lot of things there. You were talking about WhatsApp. What about Signal as an app? That's an app that was starting from encryption, and now they've added everything else, videos and calls and all that stuff. That's pretty good. And also, I also use Proton Mail in Switzerland, and
Yep.
that again started with basically cryptography, and then it was encrypted, and they're adding I don't know what storage now and all kinds of other things, VPNs, for example. That's another use of encryption.
Yes, a couple of good examples there.
And the Silk Road thing, I think Brian was talking about that. That was basically the government hacking a Tor server and basically monitoring the traffic. I thought that's how they did that. Maybe I got that wrong, but Tor has a problem, as you said.
Silk Road 1 takedown. Yeah, that was the government owned enough Tor exit points so they could correlate entrance with exit.
Yeah, they kept popping up like mushrooms.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you remember from a guest speaker that I brought to one of the Septembers, Tor was funded by naval intelligence.
That's right.
For their use, not for collecting information, but for secure communication with covert assets. So it was in their interest to invest in the infrastructure. If they could also use it to collect information on drug lords, all the better.
Yeah, the Silk Road thing, and you know, that's a great point, Andy. That you know, that it was different, very different than the blockchain stuff that we talked about. But the thing that broke that case was one of the investigators found an email of the person who was who was basically hiring, I think, technical assistants, and there was just he gave away his true identity, and which allowed them to to do a lot more tracking.
There were several pieces there. That is indeed one. The Tor is another. But in other cases, the traceability of the supposedly anonymous Bitcoin transactions, the traces were entered in evidence to prove criminal transactions. And that's my point, where the promised properties of the crypto system were not delivered. So I wouldn't trust promises of properties from people working with the same code base in the future. They may not have fooled you or me, Brian, but it's still the general case of fool me once, shame on you; fool me twice, shame on me. If you and I didn't believe them last time, why would you believe them this time?
Yeah, no, it took somebody to actually to prove that this stuff was was a lot less anonymous than people thought. But it kind of seemed from the beginning that it was, that's where it was going to lead. On the other hand, it's someday we're probably going to have that we're going to hear that the algorithm that email services or web hosters or use is somebody cracked it, and we're probably not going to know. I don't know. It's possible we're not going to know for a very long time until after that they've been using it for a long time and using this secret access for a long time, and before people realize.
And so switching to a system supported by Ponzi brokers is going to improve life, I see.
Bill, yeah, no. By the way, I'm going to put a slide up for. This is not an endorsement of anything except math, and
Bill's a cynic.
I think that's but it certainly has led to a lively discussion. So I think the real thing is in looking back of this, it actually getting exposure to Nostr forced me to dive in a little bit into Rust as a language, and nothing to become the least bit proficient in, but it does open your mind to it was remarkable because people came out of everywhere, the woodwork, given that this was an open protocol, given that there were libraries available to work with, given that there was a simple, relatively simple spec, and all of a sudden people are putting out open source code, right? And it's in Rust, and I'd never looked at Rust, but I managed to get sort of a client and a relay built, at least with it, and make some changes to it. So that is some of the underlying greatness of the open source, and that's some of the cool part about relatively small, manageable, digestible projects that you can really get your arms around it fairly quickly too. So maybe someday in the future we'll do another follow-on, and we'll actually have a working system that people can access. That's what I'll aim for.
Yeah, it's great. I'd like to hear more about Tink in the future.
Anything else? thank you very much for hanging in there, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Brian. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, everyone, for participating. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Brian.
Yeah.